When you first launch Lightroom Classic, you might be faced with this particular window, especially in our case, since we are using a catalog that exists on a USB stick. Here, Lightroom is telling us that it cannot find the catalog, which is located at this particular location. Because of that, it can't open it. Makes sense. So you have two choices here. You can use a default catalog, which just means that Lightroom will create a new catalog which will be blank and empty, or you can choose a different catalog. In this case, since we have a catalog existing on our USB stick, which we can see located right here, we will go take a look at that. So we'll click choose a different catalog. It will bring up this dialog. You can create a new catalog, but what we're doing is opening in a pre-existing one. So choose a different catalog in the bottom left-hand corner. That will bring up this dialog, and then you will want to go to your USB stick, find the folder the catalog exists in, and then find the .lrcat file, Lightroom catalog file. Click choose. It will bring it into this dialog. Click open. And we'll just wait for a moment while it opens up. Now, if you'll remember, our catalog is essentially the database that tells Lightroom where to go, what to look at, where it's supposed to be located. It holds a record of all the edits that you've made to files in the catalog. Remember that it doesn't actually apply the edits to the raw files themselves. It holds them to the side, and it just keeps the edits in memory and applies them afterwards. Here, I just updated, so it's telling me that I can learn more about the update. I'll just click OK, got it. And here we have our photos that we have been working on up until this point. So we'll go over the general layout here of the program, just for your information. So here we have our modules. This is at the top of the screen, and it occupies the top right-hand corner of this bar. You should see your name here on the left-hand side of that same bar. If we click down there, you'll find there's an address lookup and a face detection. These are two different functions that can make workflows easier if you're the type of person who either has GPS coordinates embedded in their raw files, or if you have face detection turned on. This face detection will try and keep a catalog of faces, and it will try and make it so you can organize photos based on who's in them. I personally keep these off, but if you want, you can turn it on, and it'll take Lightroom some time to analyze the photos. If we go back over to the right-hand side on the modules, this is the library module. This is our organization and database module. This is meant to help us sort through our photos, which we have here in our grid view. Develop, as the name would suggest, is what we will use to develop the raw files. This is where you do the processing and post-processing. This window that just popped up is alerting us to a new feature called point color, and that will live here on the right-hand side. Just close that for now. So we'll get back to this later. Moving on. The map module contains a record of where your photos were taken based on their metadata. Here you can see I actually have a couple of photos that have metadata, and I'll zoom in here and you can see where they were taken, near Canmore, Alberta. I took these photos using a camera that has GPS built in, and it tagged the photos. Your camera may or may not have that feature. It's, I want to say, less common these days, and if it does, you may or may not want to use it. But if you do, or if you physically tag photos or manually tag them rather, they will show up here in the map, and it will just show you where your photos are. It can be fun to use. I don't use this feature myself, obviously, but if you feel like this might be of use to you, if you do a ton of travel photography and you want to keep sort of a visual organization of that, then you might consider either using GPS if your camera supports it, or adding the coordinates during import. Here, if we go to the book module, which is again in the upper right hand corner here, this is a book layout editor, and it will essentially help you create layouts of all the photos that you might want to include in a print book. And Lightroom allows you to export to a PDF or send the port to a service that they've partnered with, Blurb in this case. If we click this little menu in the upper right hand corner of the book module where it says book settings, Blurb photo book beside book, you'll see what your options here are. There are a ton of similar services on the market. Some can offer plugins that plug directly into different programs, such as, if you're an Apple user, Photos. And we will not be covering this particular module in this class, but know that it does exist, and there are competing services which you may or may not find more simple to use. We'll go back to the top right hand corner and click on the slideshow module. This is a module that you can use to create slideshows, as you might expect. There are some controls on the right hand side here. There's a bit of a organizational set of menus here on the left with different templates, and if you had collections or smart collections, which are, in other words, albums of photos, you have access to them here. For instance, here's session 2. These are photos that we uploaded in session 2. So you can export these slideshows to either a PDF or to video. Again, this is one way to accomplish this, and this will not be the main focus of the course, but just so you're aware that this functionality is built into the program. Again, in the upper right hand corner, we will go next to slideshow. We'll select the print module. The print module gives you print layout options, and again, with the database side on the left and the customization on the right. This is one way to print if you want to print directly from Lightroom. I personally prefer printing through Photoshop, especially if I'm doing a high quality print. I just like to be able to make any other adjustments, and I find the interface simpler. But this is one way in which you can print. We will not necessarily be printing in this class. Obviously, it's not the main focus, but again, just wanted to make sure you knew this module exists. If we click on Web, which lies next to Print, then we can create a web photo gallery through the program. Again, there are templates and database functions on the left, customization on the right, and of the ways in which I might suggest that you create an online portfolio, I don't know that I would suggest that this is the best way. I might suggest using either a service that exists already, such as Pixieset. If you find that you maybe aren't going to be distributing photos to clients and you just want a portfolio or something like that, it's a bit cliche, but I might recommend a Squarespace website. They're fairly well regarded, and you can find some discount codes and stuff for those from any number of sources. That will be, I think, probably more of a professional route to go to display your work online. That said, we won't necessarily be dealing with the web module in this course. And then here on the end we have the cloud, and your plan might have cloud storage attached to it. Mine has 20 gigabytes. I have the $13 a month plan, which is not discounted in any way. It includes Lightroom Classic, Photoshop, and I think Lightroom Creative Cloud, which is a little bit different than Lightroom Classic like we're using here, and also Lightroom on mobile, which I actually use a fair amount. I don't use the storage. I don't necessarily want my photos on Adobe servers, so I keep this turned off, but that's what's going on there. So we'll go back to the library module, and we'll give a brief overview of everything here that we see on screen. Of course, we covered the top bar here. You'll notice at each of the four edges there will be a small arrow. If you click the arrow, you'll notice that the associated navigation and options disappear. If you hover, they will pop back. So if you need more real estate on your screen, that's a way to function. Or you can just leave it open like that. On the far left-hand side here, we have our navigation and database. Here we have our navigator. This will show you the image that you currently have selected. You have various zoom options. Right here we have fit. You can also choose fill. Fill will zoom the image until it fills the horizontal part of your screen's aspect ratio. Fit will fit it to the vertical portion of the aspect ratio. 100% will zoom in 100%, so it's showing pixel by pixel with what your screen or display is able to show you. Depending on the resolution of your files, this will display differently. A high resolution file will appear to zoom in more than a lower resolution file. We also have this other zoom function here, and then you'll notice some arrows here. So first you'll notice that when I hover my mouse, I have a little magnifying glass with a plus that zooms in. We then have a little hand icon that we can use to move around. If we click, it will return to the previous zoom. Now we have this particular type of zoom, and again, if we click, it'll go back to fit, and if we click again, it will go back to this zoom. You have several options here which are accessible right beside with these little up and down arrows. Click that, and you have various levels of zoom, all the way up to 1600% rather. So we're looking, at pixel level, and then down to 6%. In this case, quite zoomed out. And then again, if you click to zoom back to whatever you were before, it will go back to fit or fill. But when you click again, you can see that the icon is now a magnifying glass with a minus sign, indicating that it's going to zoom out. So if you want to get back to zooming in, if your mouse has a scroll wheel, I believe you can use that to change zoom, or you can click back here to 100%, then it will go back and forth. If you click too fast, like I just did, it will bring you out of the photo. And again, if you want a different type of zoom here, say 200, just to get in a bit closer, you can do that. Additionally, when you're zoomed in, if you go over to the navigator and hover your mouse over the box, you can click and drag while holding, and then you can look at whatever part of the image. Another way you can get out of this window is pressing escape, Another way you can get into it is pressing the space bar. Escape brings us back to this view. The grid view is going to show you everything that you have present in the folder that you currently have selected, or whichever collection or catalog. So to that regard, we'll go down here and we'll see catalog. Catalog has a number of different options. All photographs, if we click on that, will show us all the photographs in our catalog, whether they're 87, as is this case, or 100,000. It'll put them all into a scrollable grid like this. Here we have synced photographs. So had we synced any photos recently, they would show up here. We have quick collection. Quick collection is a means by which you can group photos really quickly on the fly. One way to do it is if you hover over the top right hand corner of a photo preview in the grid, you'll see a little circle. And if you click that circle, you'll toggle its quick collection status. So here, this one is in quick collection. Here, this one is not. So we will click the circle. It's now in our quick collection. If we go back, here it is. If we want to remove it, click the circle again. This can be a handy way to gather a group of photos that you need for something specific, or to gather a group of photos that you want to turn into a separate collection. And it's there for you as you might need it. Previous import will show you the images that were imported during the last import. So in this case, we have 53 images that were all imported at the same time. If you go below this, you will see folders. Folders is giving you a view not of your catalog, but of the actual locations that things exist in your file system. So this is the location they exist on your computer, hard drive, USB stick, etc. When we go down here, we'll have Macintosh hard drive, and then we'll have my USB stick, and we'll have the whole file structure represented here. And the way we have it set up is by years, and then by what day, month, and year it is. So if I go over here to 2021 and I click the down arrow, it will show me a series of folders. In this folder, we have 2 images from the 11th of January 2021. In this folder, we have 2 images from the 10th of September 2021, and what have you. If we click the little arrow here again, there's no subfolders, so it will just bring us to the view of that specific folder. So these are the 2 images in this folder. If we want to see everything that was in 2021, we can just highlight that folder up the chain there, and it will show us all of the subfolders worth of images. And I'm going to scroll down here past that. We have 2 other menu items here. We have collections and publish services. Just touching really briefly on here, we can use this to publish photos and or essentially perhaps export them through this menu. You can see it still has Flickr, which is quite a relic at this point, but it's still alive out there. And you can incorporate more services. That said, we won't be dealing with publish services in this course necessarily, but collections are important for your general usage of Lightroom. So here we have smart collections, and these are going to be dynamic folders of images based on certain criteria. In this case, we have 25 images from the past month. Those are images that were created or taken in the past month. And the system is reading that from the metadata. If you'll remember, metadata is all the information about the picture file that's not the picture file itself. So it can be the time that it was taken, the date, what camera. It can be the location if your camera had GPS, etc. You can also add metadata to or associate it to a raw file through Lightroom. And in this way, you're basically attaching a little bit of extra non-image data that you can use to glean some more information or organize the file. Here, if we click on Smart Collections, if we click the little plus button here, we can see that we create collection, create a smart collection, create a collection set. A collection set is essentially a folder that more collections nest into. And we'll just create a smart collection. That'll bring up the smart collection window. Here we have the name, and we can put it inside a collection set. In this case, it's going to go inside smart collections. We can unclick this check mark if we want it to just go in the main list. We'll leave it checked. And here we can create different rules. So if we see here, this one's based on rating, but you have all of these different options to choose from. Some of them require that you manually add metadata to a particular file, such as film ISO, for instance. If you were doing film scans, you could associate this metadata manually with the file, and then you could create collections based on that. All types of different options here. I won't go through the whole menus. You can take your time and explore them if you feel like this is going to be of use to you. But one I'll choose is just the pick flag. This means that we have picked an image, and for this one it is flagged. You can choose is not, and you can choose the different options here, and each of these criteria might have their own set of options. So we're going to create this collection. We're just going to name it picked and create. You can see it now exists in our smart collections. Now, of course, we don't have any currently picked, any images picked, so we're just going to go back to our click USB, and we'll go all the way to all photographs just so we see everything. And then I'll take this picture of a flower and I will hit the P, and that will flag it as picked. You can see there's a little white flag icon in the top left. It can be a little tough to see. Now if we scroll, we can see in our picked smart folder, this image exists. Now you can create other collections as well, static collections, just a normal collection. We will not put it in a collection set. We'll just, again, call this one picked. And you can see it put itself down here. Of course, there's nothing in it. So what we would have to do is go back to all photographs. So here we have our flower, and we'll come down here to our collection that says picked. You'll see it still shows 0. And we can actually just drag this file to picked. You see there is a green plus, which means it's going to add it to picked. And there we go. It now exists in this collection, and or you can refer to it as an album. A collection is just Lightroom's name for albums. But if we go back, I'm just going to collapse some of these menus. We'll go back to all photographs. You can see it's still here. We're going to unflag using U. That's the unflag hotkey. It now is no longer flagged. That white flag is gone. And if we scroll down here, we'll see it's no longer in the Smart Collection folder for picked, but it is in our static collection for picked. So that's how you can create these collections and albums. On the right side of the screen, you have some editing settings, starting with our histogram up here. This gives us some information about the file. The histogram, of course, is split up into different areas. Starting on the far left-hand side is true black, and on the far right-hand side is, full 100% white, and everything in between are shades of gray. It goes from the black to shadows, and you have midtones, highlights, and you'll have your whites on the right-hand side. What these graphs themselves are illustrating is what these are showing are colors of light. Here we have blue, green, and then we can see red peeking out here as well. And this shows us the 3 color channels. Then we have the total luminance, which is represented by this gray or white area of the curve. That's where all 3 colors overlap. What this means for this particular file is that in the shadows, there's a lot of blue. And as you go towards the midtones and the highlights, there's not a lot. It shows that, again, in the shadows a bit, but approaching the midtones, we have lots of green light and lots of red. They're up here near the top. And, in the true midtones, here right smack dab in the middle, we have very comparatively low amounts of those colors in intensity. And if you come all the way to the right hand side where the highlights are, you can see that there's very little highlight in this photo, but what is there is largely blue. Now, if I was to say increase the exposure, increasing the exposure will represent in the histogram. Since we added exposure, it has now shifted everything towards the right because everything's brighter. So no longer do we have shadows in the image to represent, but we have lots of midtone and then lots of highlight. And I did that using this quick develop section here. You can apply a saved preset if you have one. White balance is next. Usually it will default to as shot. You can choose auto or one of the specific white balances, but if you set this in your camera to the correct conditions, it will usually represent fairly nicely. You can manually tweak it using temperature and tint here. They're rather cumbersome. You can change them a little bit or a lot in either direction. I find that these are meant to help you assess the file, but any true developing or true editing should happen in the develop module. Here we have tone control, and again there's an auto, but you can manually boost the exposure or drop it. And you can apply same boosts or drops to any of these variables. For instance, if you needed to see if there's something hiding in the shadows, you could bump them up here, etc. Or if you wanted to see if you had blown the highlights out, you can use the highlights here to really quickly assess that. Again, today we'll just be touching on this, but the true editing should happen in the develop module. Next, as we go down here, we see keywording. Keywording is a way that you can add essentially tags to your files. So I'm going to add a tag here, flowers. Of course, it would help if I could spell. There we go. And then I will hit enter. Flowers has now added itself as a keyword to this file. If I click on the one next to it, you'll see it's no longer there, but it does exist here. Again, I'll go back to this file of some mushrooms. If you look, it'll give you keyword suggestions, flowers, dog, and dudes, which are something that we set up in class the last 2 days. However, the thing that allows you to use this keywording feature are the keyword sets down here. And here it will show you recent keywords. And there are different default and custom presets that you can add here. So for instance, you could add flowers, dudes to a particular file, and then it would show up in those particular tags. So it's now added them to our keyword tags for that file. That said, this is a picture of mushrooms, so I'll just undo that by again clicking on these two options. You can toggle them on and off. That said, if we go back to our original photo here of the flowers and we see it says flowers, we can use the keyword list and we can see how many photos exist under each of these tags, and you can change between them. You'll see that it will highlight them. If you look in the top left-hand corner of the grid, you'll see some highlighting happening there. So you can use these to go only to or sort by these photos that have been tagged in this way. I did that clicking the little icon to the right of the number. So if I want to see photos with, I suppose, dogs in them, I'll go to where the number says 4 and I'll click the arrow and it will sort the dog photos. Same thing for our flowers. Here we are. And that is making use of the library filter menu, which we will talk about here in a moment. If you scroll down past the keyword list, and keep in mind sometimes these options are collapsed, so you might need to expand them. But here we have metadata. Metadata, again, as we talked about, is not the image part of the image file, but it can be embedded in that file. And it's all the little parts that add up to that particular file, or that are associated with it, rather. So for instance, this is the date the photo was captured on, the dimensions. Here we have the type, the megapixels, the camera, etc., shutter speeds, everything here. Now, you might not have this all showing as default, and you can customize it using this button that says Customize at the bottom of the menu. It'll bring up this drop down and you have all of these options, and you can use the ones that are most relevant to you. Again, if we go to the top of this menu, there are some presets as well, and you can edit presets. Perhaps you have one for just basic info, date, time, etc. Then you have one for the various technical specifications like the shutter speed and the ISO and what have you. And then you can switch between them as you need them. Here we have comments, and as you can see, comments are not supported here, so we will just collapse that one for now and move on. So we will take a look here at the grid, and at the top of the grid you have the library filter. Now this is a way that you can organize and filter photos. You briefly saw this when we used the keyword list to sort essentially the photos that just associated with that keyword. Currently we have none selected, but you can select text, attribute, or metadata. Here we have text, so if there's text metadata associated with the file, it can be searched here. Attributes, these are things like flags. Here the white flag, that's picked. No flag is you, and to flag as a photo that you might want to delete or something, you can use X. Here we can see if there were edits made to the photo, Here we have the rating. So if the photos have been starred at all, you can sort by the stars. And if you associated a color tag, you can use this menu here. And then depending on the file, original photo, the kind is the Mac version of what file type. We can see if there's virtual copies, originals, or videos. Here, you can probably ignore this. Where you might have use of this is if you are using Lightroom's AI denoise feature and it creates a copy, you can go back and forth between the originals and other types here. So, for instance, if I come back here to our flower and I flag it as a pic, if I click on the white flag, it'll show me anything that's flagged as a pic. If I click on the unflagged flag, it's actually going to keep this one highlighted as well. So it will show all the photos. We have to actually physically click on that one to turn it off. If we click the rejected photos, they would show up here. It's going to be handy for gathering photos during what we call the culling process, where we trim down our photos from a shoot and get rid of the ones that, maybe are blurry that we don't want to use. And you can actually just highlight them all from here and do what you need to do with them, whether it's delete them, etc. And again, the same thing goes for the star ratings here. So if you've been star rating your photos, that's where it can be useful. Now, if we go to metadata, we get something different. Here, by default, we have keyword. So keyword is flowers, but I'm going to click on all keywords. This will give us access to all of the photos. You can now see the cameras that were used to take these photos, the lenses that were used to take these photos, and if there's any labels. So in this case, let's say we wanted to see all of the photos taken with this camera. It will sort just the photos taken with that camera. Now, it looks like 5 different lenses were used, so we can select any of these photos, or any of these lenses rather, to see the photos that were associated with that lens or taken with that lens. And this is where the program is reading metadata out of the file. This is where it's handy to have this built in. And if there is a label, we could sort by that, but here we essentially have no labels, so it's a moot point. When you're done, you can click None, and you'll go back to the main screen there. All the way at the bottom now, we have a black bar with some different options, and then a ribbon navigation, which shows all of the photos chronologically, one after another. Now, if you look down in the left-hand corner, we have 2 options here. We have essentially 2 windows to choose from. So right now, we have only a first window active, but we can click and open up a second window. And here, we've got some different options. So you'll see our grid and everything is still alive and well over there, but we have a comparison view here and the ability to even zoom in. We have a grid view, and if you'll notice when we choose grid here, in the background it has put our comparison onto window number 1. If we go to loop, we can essentially assess this photo, and in the bottom right hand corner you can choose different levels of zoom. Here you'll see it's showing us the embedded preview. Anytime that you are looking at a photo of a raw file, you're actually not looking at the raw file itself. It's not possible to look at every permutation of data. So what it does is it outputs a preview, which is essentially a JPEG, And this is the one that the camera embedded in the file. Of course, this is not necessarily a representation of the ability of the file to be edited. This is just a preview. If you come over here, we already have seen compare, but controls exist in the bottom here to swap the photos, move to the next one, what have you. And we have a survey option here. And here we again have a bit of a comparison, and you can scroll through your photos and compare them to this static one. If you go to grid here, you can change the size of the thumbnails and of course look through your various collections via this drop-down menu when you click on all photographs. We can close this view and it puts us back into the library. However, you can see we're not in the view we necessarily had left in. We can return using the grid view here. Now, one thing you might note, by default, you'll have a toolbar at the bottom. That can be toggled using T on the keyboard. Here we have our grid view, our singular view. We can do our compare view. We have here our survey view. And lastly, we have our people view. As discussed previously, you can use this to have the program identify faces if that's something that you need. I don't usually have need of that particular feature myself. And here are some options on how to suggest what it is being viewed as when you have people who do not have a associated face, which is to say that the file doesn't read as having any particular one's face in it. But we'll go back to grid. Here we can actually change the size of the thumbnails. If you move to the far right of this menu, or this toolbar rather, you have a slider, it says thumbnails, and you can change the size to whatever suits you. You also see that we have some sorting options, a way to change these sorting options, and the painter. These live in the drop-down menu at the far right-hand side of the toolbar here. You can click on that, and you can actually choose from a number of different options, and that will pop up the options here at the bottom. Again, to dismiss this particular view, press T. To show it again, press T again. That is almost all of the functions here in the library module. If we move over to the bottom left-hand corner, we'll see two buttons, import and export. This is how you bring in files to your catalog and export them as finished products or as files that you can work on a different day. If you click on import, we'll be taken to a new menu. Again, it has the general layout of left, middle, and right, with the left-hand side including what source is. If you click on a source, here in this case the USB stick, it will bring down the menu of all the different options available. If I click on it again, I can tell it, look in that directory for photos. However, it's not finding any because none exist in that one directory. They exist in these subdirectories. So what we can do is click the little button that says include subfolders, and it will find all of the photos. Here we're seeing nothing because if you see towards the top, it says new photos. Here, I do not have any new photos to import. I only have photos that I already have imported. So to show those, I will click all folders, and it will bring up all of the photos on the USB stick that are available to me to import. Here they're grayed out because they've already been imported. If you click on destination folders, you'll also see the photos that exist at a particular destination, and that can be chosen from the right-hand menu here, which in this case mirrors the left-hand source menu. This is the destination. We won't go that far just yet. We're going to try and find a new photo. So we want to import something. So here we're going to look in the hard drive. In my case, I'm going to go to Users, select the login for this computer, go to Desktop, and here I'm going to select the folder Stuff because I know there are some photos here. Here you can see there's 1,624 photos in this particular folder. So you can select and deselect which photos you want using these little plus and or check mark boxes. You can select a photo, hold the Shift key, click on a later photo, and select all of the photos in between the two if you'd like to select multiple. You can use Command and click on any one photo to add or remove it to the import. You can click the little check mark when multiple are selected and it will deselect them or reselect them. And in those ways you can select or deselect multiple photos for your particular usage here. So one thing that is going to possibly be important is what you're going to do with the files. So if you look at the very top of the grid here, you have copy as DNG, copy, move, and add. Now, copy as DNG, what a DNG is a digital negative. It was a open source standard for digital RAW files, and as you might expect, most camera manufacturers went for a proprietary system. There are some that can output as DNG, but what the program here does is it gives you the option to convert to DNG from whatever type of RAW it is. Perhaps if it's a Canon RAW, something like a .cr2 file. If it's a Sony RAW, .arw, Nikon.nef. If you select this, it will copy the files from, in this case, my stuff folder. It will convert them to DNGs, and it will put them in the file structure that we have selected as our destination, which we'll talk about in a moment. If I don't want to do that, if I just want to copy the file, I can select that. If I actually want to physically move the file from the source and have it moved to the destination, we can select Move. It will no longer exist on the source. It will only exist on the destination. Finally, we can choose Add, and here we can add photos to a different catalog without moving them. So in this case, if you wanted two catalogs to reference the same set of photos that exist on a hard drive, here what we can do, and you didn't want them to make new copies, etc. You just want them to both reference back. Here you can use Add, and then it will add their location to your particular catalog's catalog file, and it will tell Lightroom where to reference them from, but the physical files will not move. So that can be handy if you need to, work on the same set of photos, but part of multiple catalogs. Today, I'm going to use Copy. I'm going to move to the bottom of the grid here. Here we have a grid view, a singular view again, and you'll see we can check all and uncheck all. I'm going to click Uncheck All, and it's going to uncheck all of my photos. I want to do this because I do not want to import all 1,600 photos. I'm just going to use one as an example. You could conversely check all of them using this other key here, but for now I'm going to do that, and I will select just this one photo. Now I have a photo selected, and I know that it's going to copy into my catalog, and it will copy the file physically to my USB stick, which is over here. You can change this destination by clicking on it. You get a number of common options, and then you can choose a custom destination, and here you have recent destinations. In this case, this is the perfect place for it as far as what I want to do with it, so I'm going to leave it here. File handling. This is what is going to happen with your file. So you can build previews. If you'll remember, previews are just a JPEG representation of what the raw file is. And that JPEG can be of various sizes. So if you want to have a certain size, you can choose it here. You can have minimal, standard, or one-to-one, or embed and sidecar, and that just means it's going to add it into the file, the raw file itself, and the raw file will carry around a little preview in its wallet with it everywhere it goes. One-to-one means a full-sized preview, pixel for pixel. This takes up the most space. Minimal takes up the least space. We'll leave it on the default for now. The next option is to build smart previews. Smart previews allow you to work on editing a file without the actual file present. And what that means is that, let's say you had your files on a hard drive at home and you had your catalog on a USB stick with you on a plane or at school or just somewhere else. Had you built smart previews for the images that you wanted to work on, you can still work on them in Lightroom. You can edit them. It will show you a representation of what things will look like. Even though it doesn't have the raw file to pull from, it keeps track of the characteristics of that file. So this is a way where you can work further away from your actual storage, and then when you get back, you can reconnect and those edits will be applied to your raw files in the event that you are going to export, etc. You can make a second copy. Here we don't really need that redundancy, but if you do, that's where it is. Do not import selected duplicate or suspected duplicates. This, if you'll recall, if I click over here to click USB, and I bring up all the files that are already in our catalog, it'll say don't import suspected duplicates, and you can see it will gray out all the suspected duplicates. If I uncheck that, then we could feasibly re-import them, but we're not going to bother this time because we know that we already have all of these. You can also add to a collection. If you click on this, you get to pick the collection before you import. And this is what we did when we imported session 2. You can rename the file using the file renaming dialog here. We're not going to do that today. You can apply developing settings or metadata or keywords during import. So if I wanted to import these pictures of this vehicle, I could put SUV as a keyword. If I knew I had a preset to pre-develop the files, I could select it here under develop settings. And for metadata, if I, let's say, wanted to GPS tag the location, I could put the coordinates here, and then I know that the location of these photos will show up on my little map module. This can be useful, so keep that in mind. But ultimately, what is required is a destination, and this is the destination dialog. You can organize the destination by date, original folders. You can put everything into one folder. I suggest using by date. What that will do is for every year you will have a folder. And then for every day where you have pictures, it will create a new folder and it will name it the year, month, and day, or however you have it set up, because you can choose the date format right here under date format. I find this works really well because if you know that on September 23rd you did a photo shoot and you need a photo from that day, you can just go through your catalog or your database rather, click on it, and you'll see the photos that you're looking for. So after this particular set of choices up here, it'll show you your possible destinations. Here, it's selected Photos for Lightroom course. And this is the top folder that you want to have selected. If there is no folder for any given year, it will create it. If there's no folder for any given date, it will create it, and it will put the photos there. If we come here and we scroll all the way through, we find the date that this photo is going to be filed under. We'll see it's right here. It's going to create a file folder, and you can see it's got 1 of 63 denoted here, and that's where it'll end up. You'll notice this number here that occurs after the 1, that's the number of potential photos that you can pull from this particular source, in this case, my stuff folder. Now that we've done all of that, again, we could sort by file type, for instance, here, if you had a bunch of JPEGs or movies mixed in and you wanted to exclude those, you could come here and search by file type and then scroll to the top or the bottom and assess where that particular file type of files existed, and then you can uncheck them. If you come over here, it can tell you that our one photo is 38 megabytes in the bottom left-hand corner. Clicking on this arrow will turn this into a smaller dialog right in the bottom left-hand corner. If you click on it again, it will return it to this full screen dialog. You can create import presets as well and apply them here at the bottom. And here we can choose done, which is to say that we're going to accept any changes we made to this menu, but we will not import anything. Cancel, which will not save the changes we made to our options. For instance, if we change the destination, etc. And import. Finally, we'll bring our one photo of the vehicle into our database and our catalog. Here, there's a progress bar at the top, and you can see there's 2 operations in progress up there for a moment, but it will bring us to our photo. And if you come down here, you'll see that we just have one selected. There's only one in our ribbon. If we scroll through the folders menu here, open up, where would it be, 2023, 2024, it's going to be right here. However, we can access everything easily if you come down to the bottom here through this drop-down menu where it says previous import. If you click on that, well, it will bring you up a bunch of different options. All photographs, your quick collection, and any other recent sources. And you can clear these recent sources if you want them to go away, basically. You can also favorite a source or just select to see all of the photos and its place chronologically amongst them. Your selected photo will display here with everything. You'll notice beside where it says all photographs, and we have this menu, there are 2 buttons here, go forward and go back. This will bring you back or forward through your different menu changes and choices. So if I go all photographs, quick collection, previous import, I can then click on the go back button. It will bring me back to my quick collection, back to my main grid here, all photographs. Go back through the choices that I made, or go forward through them. This might be useful if you changed through a bunch of folders and then couldn't remember where to go after that. And this could be a quick way to find the last view you're looking on, especially if you clicked off by accident. And that is a full summary of session 1.